just to help you understand kind of where our software tools fit in, we'd like to kind of use an analogy that you can probably relate to. So let's think of your SAP maintenance system like a big complex piece of equipment. Now, to run at peak performance, your machine really needs to be fueled with high quality data and maintained on a regular basis. But as I'm sure a lot of you know, the trouble is with doing that, that can take a lot of time and effort. It's a lot of work to get the data into SAP correctly and to keep that data up to date. But if you don't do that, you can run into a lot of problems.
So this is an Excel workbook for equipment maintenance, and you'll notice we have a Winshuttle Run tab. So it's an Excel add-in, and you'll see here we've got where we've logged into Winshuttle, and I've also logged into SAP. And by the way, if you need to write to multiple SAP systems, so if you need to put this in quality or dev first, you can. Then you just log out of SAP and then log back onto SAP again to a different system. So that's cool if you want to move between systems. Also in here I've got several things I can do. I can query the equipment master. We're going to do that first, and I'll show you that in a second. I can do some mass updates. I've also got a form in here, and I've actually got a couple, and so this is creating equipment, and then I can do some mass updates. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to query what's in SAP now. So I'm going to run this. And at this point, I'm working as a runner, so I'm not a developer. So the developer has developed this for me, and this is what a runner needs to know to be able to run a query. It's going live into SAP and pulling the data out of SAP the way it is right now. So if you're used to using VW, there is no delay. You don't have to wait till tomorrow to make sure to get your data refreshed to look at it again. So this is downloading from SAP, and if you're familiar with the equipment screens, you know that there's multiple tabs in there, multiple views. So I've got information from my general tab, location, organization, and warranty tabs, okay? So what's cool about this is I can now only show the user the fields that they need to update. And right now we're looking at equipment, but use your imagination. This could be equipment, this could be functional location, this could be customer, vendor, materials. So whatever you're involved in, you can set up the same type of spreadsheet for all of the above. In this particular example for today, we're looking at equipment. So we've got some things in here that are automatically built in. So for example, weight unit. Let's say I'm not sure which weight unit I want to use. I can click on one of the fields and under weight unit and click on lookup values. Oh, sorry, got to change to my change. That's my query. I've got to change over to change. Okay, so this is my IE02 where I'm actually going to do the change. So now I can do my lookup values. And what that's going to do is it's going to go, as you can see, it's popping up my SAP screen. It's going to go live into SAP. It's over here on my other screen and show me all of my options for units of measure. If you have a personal list in SAP, so if you have a shorter list, that's what will come up first, just like it would if you were in SAP. Also, here we go. Also, over here, I've got something if you look at this planner group, I'm going to do lookup values. So here, we've got a much bigger list of planner groups in SAP, but let's just say I want to clamp this down for this particular worksheet. I only want my users to be able to use one of these 10 planner groups. So it does have to be a valid SAP selection, but it can be a much shorter list. So think of this in terms of if you want to maybe restrict the company code that they look at or the plant that they look at, you can lock that down and they're only able to look at one of these. So let's just say I don't know, this is blank, I don't know what's in there. I'm going to do my lookup values and I'm going to choose, for example, I01, and it automatically puts it in there for me. I could also type that in manually. And I'm just going to put a mistake in here. I'm going to leave a few the same just so you can see what happens. And I'm going to just update some of these other ones. Okay. So now I'm moving all my planner groups from I00 to I01. So that's one thing I need to do. And just for grins, let me find another field over here and put another mistake in here. So now I've gone through and updated my data, and now I want to check it before it goes into SAP. So if you're used to using LSMW, you don't get a really good information on what the problem is, and sometimes you can't even run it personally. If you're a business user, you have to turn it over to your IT team. But with Winshuttle, as long as the user has access to that T code, they're able to run it straight here from Excel. This looks much better. So in other words, I've got some errors, and it's telling me here that my setting needs to be in the range of numbers that I have selected. So as I'm running through here, I can see all of the rest of these look good. And I've got 5 errors. So let's fix those errors now. Give it a chance to finish. Okay. And I'm putting these back to the way they were on purpose because I want to show you what happens when you don't change them. All right, now what's cool is let's say you have thousands of records and you have a handful of errors. Now I can just do validate only error rows. So now it's only going to look at those few rows that we had errors on, in this case 5. It's only going to look at those. And now I'm going to cross my fingers and hope they all say success. So far, so good. Yay. Okay, so that tells you line by line where your errors are. And then now I'm going to turn around and do a run. And this is no longer validating. This is actually going to go into SAP and make changes. And did you see my screen flash? I'll show you something in just a second. But this backup data over here, so what's going to happen is it's going to go into SAP, see everything that I'm touching right now, and bring out what that data is in SAP right now and create a backup data tab. So what that means is if I've made a mistake and I need to roll that back, I can put it back to the way it was prior to doing my updates. Also, that's good for your auditors. So if your auditors want to say what was it before you made the change, they can look at that tab and see what it was before, and then they look at this tab and see what it is after. And you'll notice up here as well, this tells you which SAP system that you were writing against and who did the records, the date, the time. And of course, this is right now, it's just talking about the ones that we just validated a few minutes ago. When this gets finished, this will change up here and it will tell me how many records were changed, the date, the time. And also, if your developer may require you to enter a run reason in case you need that for auditing purposes as well, or if your business processes calls for that. So we're almost finished, just a few more records. Another thing too I'll point out up here is you can do a specific row of a range of rows. So if I just wanted to do, for example, for testing purposes, if I wanted to do 6 through 12 or 12 through 20 or whatever, I could have put a range up here and just validate it against those or run against those as well. Almost done. And you'll see here, now this has been updated. We wrote against WE6. We uploaded 27 records. Tells me who did it. And then over here, this is just raw data of what the data was. So I could actually rerun this again, copying and pasting using the same information and put it back the way it was. So now this was for updates. Imagine if you wanted to do a create, and imagine you could have a workbook that has multiple tabs in there, which I have 2 in this case. So I could do an Excel form, for example, to do an equipment create. So these are all of the same fields that are over here, except for I want my user just to do one at a time. So now I can say, okay, let's do an equipment create using the form and then do a validation. And this is where that log field that was in our column A over here in equipment updates, it's going to be in here. So it's successful, meaning all of my data looks good here. When I get ready, I can click on run. If this equipment number was already created in SAP, it will tell me it was. If not, it'll tell me it created, and we created the equipment. Imagine you could have a workbook, again, with a bunch of different tabs and each one doing something else. So if you're a planner or if you're in charge of material equipment maintenance, you can have the form in here. You can have the to do one at a time. You can have the mass in here to do hundreds or thousands at a time. And you can always have that backup tab if you're doing changes. As a matter of fact, I highly recommend that backup tab every time you're doing changes. So let's look at a different Excel file. This has more to do with reporting. So this is an example of what are my stock requirements for this material number at this plant. And again, I could have this in the same exact workbook as the other one. For this one, it's not exactly applicable. It's not related, but you could have more equipment type reports in there if you wanted, and however you want to do it. But what we're doing now is we're actually using a BAPI. So if you have any BAPIs in SAP that you're using, and all a BAPI is something that IT has written specifically for you, and it usually has data across multiple T codes. So in here, I'm going to upload some information. So I'm saying for this material and this plant, what is my stock requirements, or what are my stock requirements? And you'll notice here, it gives me all of the information, the header information for that material, and then over here on the right, all of the stock requirement information. So it makes that a lot easier than doing that in SAP. And then you could obviously you could have multiple tabs in here all doing different things.
So Tammy, on that one you mentioned BAPI, but could you be using Winshuttle query also to build this type of report? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, good point, Jeanette. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, this could have been a query. This particular one's using a BAPI, but it could be a query as well. So it's no different than what we did from the equipment perspective a while ago when we downloaded that current equipment information from SAP. You could use a query to download this as well, either way. And a lot of people are concerned about query and what if I download too many records? Is it going to bring our SAP system down? Winshuttle has something called query throttling. So what that means is it looks at your network traffic as you're downloading that data from SAP, and it makes sure that it controls the amount of information coming across. So if it needs to slow down and bring across less records and expand and contract as needed to keep your network traffic under control, and so that Winshuttle doesn't do that, that's what it does. And that's called adaptive query throttling. But you absolutely could use a query.
Yeah, and I think also, don't you have the ability in user governance to sort of set how many records and who can do it when, and so you have those controls over that too.
Yeah, exactly. You can set that in policies, and also you can set who's an advanced developer, basic developer, and what can an advanced developer do, what can a basic developer do. And so you have all kinds of control. You can also control who has access to what plant. So clamp that data down as far as you want using our Winshuttle function module that gets installed on the SAP server to give you some additional security. And last but not least, my favorite subject is our web forms and workflow. So in this particular example, we're going to do a PM notification creation, and then we're going to route it to a plant maintenance manager or supervisor. In this case, it's a manager. And then that manager is going to determine whether or not they want to create a work order from the notification. So a couple things I want to point out. You can automatically populate the user's name who's logged in, and then in this case we've got a lookup that goes out and looks at my cost center. And the cool thing about the way we've got this report designed is I'm only going to see the functional locations that are associated to my cost center. So instead of seeing the entire list of functional locations, I'm going to see a short list. Okay. And we've got some things in here that are called, for example, data-driven rules, and I'll show you some of those in a second, but let me show you something else first. So if I click on the first one, for example, notice here, this tells me what's in SAP right now. So if I went into SAP, it goes out and does a lookup and gives me information about this functional location, so I know what I'll be reporting against, okay? Something else I want to point out is for this particular functional location, we have these types of emergencies: rush, emergency, critical. But if I change it to a different type of functional location, like this one, for example, I can change this to be what % is this down, okay? And this is all user definable, user customizable, and yes, this is for PM notification, but imagine this as if you're doing equipment creation or material creation or something like that. You can write data-driven rules to change these drop-downs based on what the user chooses. You can also make things required. You can hide fields that aren't needed whenever they pick a specific selection. So all kinds of different things you can do. You can do data validation, did they match a pattern, and all kinds of things there. So going down the lines of the standardization that we were talking about. So when it comes to quality reporting, whenever you have work orders where you need to repair a pump or a piece of equipment or a functional location, being able to report on that is very important. It's such a pain. If you're having to manually today look through spreadsheets and look through text, you can build things in here. For example, failure type. You can use some standard, industry standard failure types, for example, mechanical. And again, this could be data driven, so depending on which one of these I choose. So for example, I choose mechanical, and these are my mechanical faults standards. So I'm just going to say leakage here. And you'll notice that little bubble that pops up, it says maximum 40 characters. So if I type over 40 characters, it will never go over. It will just stop. So we'll just, for grins, that's 40 characters. So let's see, let's say, please fix leak, for example. Okay. So this is going to help because now when you go to do your operational reporting, you can actually pull this information out and see exactly what was the reported fault, and that's going to help you, your quality department, whenever it comes time for them to say, okay, this is what was reported, but that really wasn't the root cause. Let's find the root cause. So instead of trying to look through all of this text and description, now you've got some standard codes and it's easier to report on. So at this point, I want to create a notification, but I want to make sure that all of my data is correct. And as you've noticed, the developer has made it not completely foolproof probably, but pretty foolproof because they're kind of limiting what they can select and what they can't. It really makes the user's life easier if they can have predefined values in there. But just in case, I want to do a validation. So this is similar to what I did in Excel. And this is going live out into SAP and letting me know if I have an error. And in this case, I don't, which is good. Now, when I turn this off, I can have this text change, create notification in SAP. Just say, okay, I'm ready to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and create my notification. And it returns the fact that it created one, what the notification number was created, and you'll also notice that it hides the button now so that this user knows that this was created. If I need to attach a file, for example, I want to show a picture of the leak, I can attach a file. You can do more than one if you want. And then you can delete once you've added if you want as well. And then if I want to put some comments in, any comments, I can put some more details down here if I want. At this point, I can either route to manager or I can save. Let's say, oops, I forgot to take a picture and I want to save it and come back later, or maybe, oh, lunchtime, I'm going to finish this after lunch. I can save it and come back later, or I can do route to manager. And what's happening now is we're running a workflow. Let me show you what's going on. So when we first submit it, the originator is going to get an email that said it was submitted. Then we're going to send that to a manager for review. If the manager creates a work order, we're going to send an email to the user, and if not, the workflow is going to end. So I will also be notified as a manager that I have a task via email, and you can choose to let your manager either approve via email or not. In this case, probably not, because they need to go in and decide whether they want to interact with SAP. But if you have a case where maybe a manager just needs to see a picture of whatever the request is, so you can attach it as a PDF, you can attach it as a JPEG, and it will also attach the attachments to an email, then you can do email approval as well, and you don't have to interact with the form at all if that's what you choose. That's part of the business process. So I do have a task here as a manager. And you'll notice everything that the user put in is disabled, so the manager is not allowed to change anything because you don't want that original request to change. If you want to do that, then we need to set up something that will reject it back to the user and say you need to make the following changes and allow them to change or not. So at this point, I've got a choice. I can see that a notification was created, and I can choose whether I need to create a work order or not. If I say yes, I'm going to go back through the similar steps what I did earlier when I did the notification. And you'll notice, again, data-driven rules. So for yes, I'm going to display this section. For no, I'm going to display something else. Again, work order not created. Data validation, data rules. I can come in here, work order not needed or duplicate notification. I can come here and say, nope, this is duplicate. We don't need a work order already reported, for example. And if I wanted to open up one of the files, I certainly could from here and put in comments. And you'll notice down here, I can see what was done already. By the way, this whole section, no programming needed. There's something called process. There's a little I'll just show you over here just to give you an example of just how hard that is to add. Process control, I just drag this guy into the bottom section over here and it creates that entire section for me. No programming needed there. So at this point I'm finished. I don't need a work order in this particular example, and I do complete, and that completes my work form and workflow. Now, for time purposes, I only have it doing a couple of things, but in the real world, you could attach a task list there. You could create a plant maintenance schedule there. You can use your imagination, all the additional things and additional steps you could add on there. But for the demo, I just wanted to show a couple things that you can do to give you some ideas and let you think about some things you can do.
So Tammy, I have a question on that web form. That looks really, really useful. I can imagine how that could be used by anyone in the field or anyone on the factory floor or in an office building or whatever. So can those forms be used on mobile devices?
They can, yes, exactly. So what happens is the form gets automatically adjusted to the screen that you're using. So if you've got someone out on the floor, for example, that uses an iPad and they see a leak, they could take a picture with their iPad and they can open up that form on the network, enter the information, and attach that picture right away. Okay. And it will adjust. So the fields auto-adjust based on what type of device that you're on, whether it be a cell phone, an iPad, a laptop, whatever.